Well, this Rutgers men's basketball team has done the impossible, and it's not what we had envisioned at the start of the season. They have broken the will of myself and many Rutgers fans, and would rather this season be over at this point than what happened tonight. 171 loss at Purdue. It was, per KenPom, the second worst defensive efficiency rating in the game since KenPom's existed for this program. Second worst for this program ever in the 25 plus year history of KenPom. The worst, obviously, of the Steve Pikiell era. The worst ever was the infamous 50-point loss at home to Purdue in Eddie Jordan's final days. And maybe it's poetic just in terms of how disappointing this season has been and how disappointing the effort was tonight. I had a terrible feeling about this game. This was the least excited I was going into a Rutgers men's basketball game, and I can't remember when. And that goes, to the earliest days of I guess to the last season of Eddie Jordan. That has to be it, because I just after the Michigan loss, obviously very disheartening loss. And a big reason I had issue with so many fans blaming the refs is there's just too many flaws on this team that reared its ugly head in that loss. And you never lose because of a call or two calls. And sure, when you're at the bottom of the conference and you're playing the team tied for first, who do you think the Big Ten wants to win? You're not going to get any breaks. But to act like Rutgers lost that game to Michigan because of the refs is being blind and in denial of the problems with this team. And those problems were in full bloom in West Lafayette. It was a impossible task on senior day to think that they could beat this Purdue team. They hung in a little bit in the first half. I mean, they had a bit of a run there where they were hot, and then it all fell apart. They're up 27-19, I guess. So what they get outscored 81 to 54, 44, 81 to 44. Is that real? I think that's real. The defensive effort was just indefensible tonight. The glass, I mean, this team, just the second half in particular, they just did not. This was not Rutgers basketball, and honestly, the score was not nearly as bad as the effort was. And Rutgers clinching back-to-back losing seasons now in a season where the defense has been an absolute mess. They're now 135th in KenPom for the season. That's by far the worst of the Steve Pikiell era. And I guess it's, makes sense that in this game, you would see that type of defensive effort where it basically puts a nail in the coffin on this team to ensure a losing regular season with this team. The only other ultimate disappointment is them missing the Big Ten tournament. And sadly, it's unfortunate that I even have to joke about this, but they probably are going to make the Big Ten tournament because the way the odds are stacked. I mean, at this point, if they beat Minnesota, they'll still probably be an 11 or 12 seed. I haven't looked at the math yet, but the probability going into tonight was that they were most likely going to be an 11 seed, project them to beat Minnesota. And it's hard to have much faith at all that this team is even going to beat Minnesota. I mean, the plight of a Rutgers fan, they lose to Minnesota, probably will still make the Big Ten tournament. It's just I'm trying to gather the words to express my frustration and to express the disappointment. Yesterday, I was angry. I had a whole kind of thing in my head of what I was going to say. And honestly, I just didn't have time to do it. And by the time it was the end of the night, I lost my juice. And, I think the state of this team, right, is one thing. And the state of where this program is right now is a whole nother. And where Rutgers athletics is. I mean, it's March 4th. And they have no athletic director. President Holloway stepping away in June. I had hoped that by now we would have a president and there would be a plan, a succession plan, and then you're full knee deep in your athletic director search. And maybe I'm out of the loop. I'm not acting like I know anything. I'm really, really busy with work in a good way right now, my family, and I'm not that connected in terms of knowing, even speculating what's going on. But I can tell you this, it's March 4th. There's no president, there's no athletic director, there's no head of legal counsel, which, by the way, don't underestimate that fact, because with revenue sharing potentially what they think is going to start with the NIL era, you need that. It just places more emphasis on that role, and none are filled. And the best we have going for us is, and no disrespect to interim AD Ryan Passari, put in an impossible situation himself, has been a loyal soldier for Rutgers over the last decade plus. But the most we have going for us right now is in an interview with Steve Politi a week and a half ago, saying Rutgers was going to, in fact, hire a GM for hoops, a position that many programs have started to fill, and that most educated fans have been begging for. And all we have is a promise of an interim AD saying this is gonna happen. Mind you, the job is not posted, and the portal opens in 2 weeks. 2 weeks. No president, no AD, no head of legal counsel, no GM position posted, and Rutgers basketball delivering its worst defensive effort of the Pikiell era in a season full of them. And this team, honestly, is just, they've killed my soul for this team, for this program, because it's become, I don't think hopeless is the wrong word, but the frustration and the expectations, which, partly, of course, I'm to blame, because I really thought in seeing this team in the preseason, in the effort they displayed, that this team was going to go places and that they were going to develop over time, and that obviously has been a miserable failure in that regard. Steve Pikiell, I love him. Rutgers fans should always owe him for what he did to turn around the program. Be grateful for that. But it's been increasingly hard to watch him process what's happened this season. And it's never positive to see a coach that you like go through this type of season in terms of how they handle it. But, commenting after the USC and Washington's wins, on his podcast, that, complaining about the media and fans complaining about this team, and, not recognizing the great work they do off the court with, academics and charity work. And yes, he has certainly restored the pride in this program, and he's run a clean program. He's brought in great kids from great families, and that's nothing to sneeze at. But in this day and age, in the NIL era, in the hopefully soon to be revenue sharing era, when you're an extremely high paid coach, top 25 in the country, I think, college basketball, obviously second highest employee in the state, you're paid that way for a reason. You're paid to win basketball games. And I love Steve Pikiell, and that will never change. But this type of defensiveness, this type of pushback for almost wanting kind of I don't know how to phrase this exactly, but he's increasingly over the years, his expectations have grown. And now 3 years in a row, extremely disappointing February to March runs for this program. He's become increasingly frustrated with the media and the fan base. And the facts are, it's mutual, right? Because at the end of the day, you just want accountability. And I'm sure we'll hear a good reason why, but he didn't come out for his radio interview after this loss to Purdue. Brandon Knight did. And without knowing circumstances, right? Maybe there is a circumstance that justified him not coming out. But on the face of it, it's unacceptable. You have to come out and face the music. I know he cursed after the Michigan game, show some passion. Maybe, I don't know, was there a suspension there? I don't know. But in terms of not being able to be on the radio after the game, the point is Steve Pikiell has to accept the fact that he's here to win basketball games. And when this team fails, he fails. And it's completely justified for this fan base to be disappointed, to be upset. There's always going to be extremes in every fan base. There's going to be people that say ridiculous things. But this program needs to be above it. Steve Pikiell needs to be above it. And, he's the one that talks about cell phones and, fans got to get off their cell phones. Well, so do you. So does this program. So does this leadership of this program. Stop worrying about what fans and the media say and focus on this team. And I know they're focused, and I know they work their butts off. But this season's been a colossal failure. And to even give any pushback at all to fans that are loyal to their death for this program. And I'm not talking about the hangers-on. I'm not talking about the bandwagoners. I'm talking about people that thought they could jump on for the ride and are now angry because it didn't turn into that. I'm talking about people that have been fans longer than me, 40-year plus. I've been 40 years. I'm talking about the 30-year-old graduate that lives and dies Rutgers basketball. The students that have, guys that were students when Steve Pikiell took over the program. Every Rutgers fan that truly cares about basketball, reactions, feelings, emotions, those are real. And no one's piling on to pile on in that category, right? There's always going to be people that are piling on to pile on. I get it all the time. But the point is, the real, genuine fans that care about this program deeply have a right to be extremely disappointed, upset, concerned, everything. And to insinuate at all, even if that wasn't his intention, that, I think he said something about they focused on the 4 minutes against Oregon and not the 36 the team played well. I mean, come on. Let's just get real here. I mean, Rutgers you've had a losing regular season. And with 2 top 3, top 4 picks. And a lot has gone wrong. There's been some bad luck, no doubt. And I'll break down the whole season after. But Steve Pikiell has to take accountability, and he's got to eat crow. I'm sorry, but you got to eat crow. Because this type of season, I mean, I'm in what I think is the majority of loyal fans that want to see him turn this program around. By the way, those people that are calling for his firing, let me go back to my point before. There's no president, there's no AD, there's no head of legal counsel. Steve Pikiell has a lot of money left on the books, and he's not going anywhere right now. But for those that care about the program, it's about can he and will he turn this program around ever again? And, it's been a lot of talk about the GM position. Friend of the podcast, Danny Breslauer's name has been mentioned a lot. I love Danny. As a Rutgers fan, when I talk about loyal Rutgers fans, he's in that stratosphere, no doubt. Anyone that follows Rutgers basketball knows that. And I don't know what the right answer is. But I actually, in terms of what I think the program should do from a GM standpoint, I don't think it's just a GM. I don't think it's one spot. I think it's multiple spots. I think because a GM in pro sports, right, manages a cap. They have an owner that they go to get money from to make transactions. That's not what college sports is. You have revenue sharing for sure, but you're relying on NIL as well. I think the GM should be someone that's going to manage the roster in terms of construction, the portal, And then you also need a fundraiser. You also need outreach. You need multiple positions, I think, for this program to turn things right in the right direction. And if I'm Steve Pikiell, I get everybody in a room after this season, everyone. And that means his staff, every donor you can muster, people from this program of the past, successful former players in the business world that have ideas, that have connections. You have to get, big time Rutgers alumni out there. Eli Maroon is a guy, if you look him up, I mean, that guy is an innovator. He's got to be in the room. You got to go out and get people that can make things happen. And everybody's got to get in the room, and everybody's got to work together, figure it out. Steve Pikiell has to make some major changes here. He's got to look at himself in the mirror. He's got to look at his coaching staff. He's got to look at his support staff. And I love and respect everyone in that program, but things aren't working. And yes, senior night Purdue, you can't expect them to win. But the effort in this game was indefensible. It was inexcusable. I mean, minus 14 on the glass. Purdue was 18 of 36 from three, wide open threes. Fletcher Lawyer and Braden Smith combined for 14 to 25 from behind the arc. What are we doing? And that's the thing. Not only has this team lacked effort many times this year, they are not a smart basketball team. They are not a smart basketball team at all. And obviously, you're playing with a bunch of freshmen and talented freshmen at that. But this team has not shown nearly enough heart, guts, mental toughness, smarts, leadership. None of it. None of it. And ultimately, at the end of the day, it's a business, and that's on Steve Pikiell. Again, he deserves the chance to turn this around. But if he doesn't seriously evaluate everything and make some serious changes, then I think it's fair to be concerned whether he actually will. And that's all I can muster. But my will is broken, and it's awful. It's awful. I hope they beat Minnesota. I hope they make a run in the Big Ten tournament. I don't have a lot of belief that they will. I would love to eat crow myself. I would love it. But it's very disheartening to see this team go down the way in which I've talked about earlier in the season. Just go down swinging, and they're not. And again, that's on the head coach, and that's where we are. But I think, and I'll go into it more depth in terms of the context of the season and what needs to happen moving forward. But that's the gist of it. But it's March 4th. Rutgers doesn't have a president, doesn't have an AD, doesn't have a head of legal counsel, doesn't have a GM even posted for Rutgers basketball when the portal opens in 2 weeks. What are you going to do? Hire a GM in May when all the portal is, done at that point? It's maddening to me. There's a lack of leadership from the top. Amy Towers, head of the Board of Governors, I have faith in her. I do. And the Board of Governors. And maybe they're really close to some big news here. But they have to understand the weight of this, the magnitude of this, because we are at a critical stage here where we are in a constant cycle of repeating the same mistakes and being in the same dreadful situation of years of just mismanagement, scandal, everything. And as Rutgers fans, we're sick of it. We're sick of it. And major changes need to happen. Obviously, you have to do due diligence. Obviously, you have to make the right decisions. You can't mess this up. But at the same time, we're not that far away from kind of making next year a wash when you don't have leadership in place in time. And 1 year time in the grand scheme of things is a small period of time. But for someone like Steve Pikiell, he needs answers yesterday. And don't get me started on Pat Hobbs. And Steve Pikiell deserves a lot of criticism and blame for this season. But no one let Steve Pikiell down more than Pat Hobbs did, with not believing in NIL, not getting this team, this program, the support they needed to build this roster. And I just can't get his catchphrase out of my head when he talked about for many times, including saying to me in multiple interviews that A, we're building the greatest chapter in Rutgers history, and B, I want to remove that long-suffering term out of before Rutgers fans. Well, guess what, Pat? We're suffering in part because of your incompetence, your arrogance, and how you let everyone down. The student athletes, the fans, the donors, the board of governors, and probably your most favorite hire ever, Steve Pikiell. And here we are in dread, in misery, and things are pretty bleak right now. I believe in Steve Pikiell, but Steve Pikiell's got to accept what happened this season, look at himself in the mirror, and make major changes. Blaming the media and fans for criticism isn't the answer, and it's not going to win you over with the fans that you have left. Rutgers hosts Minnesota Sunday. I don't know if this was entertaining. I didn't want to do this, but unlike this team, unlike Steve Pikiell, I showed up for the podcast and trying to be a voice for Rutgers fans, because that's what the power of fans. Being a fan is a special thing, and that's what someone like Pat Hobbs could never understand. And thank God he never ruined the rack. At least we got that going for us. But when it's your life, when it's been in your family for years and years and years and years, and you're being, then how could an administrator, how could a paid coach, there's exceptions, but for the most part, how could they truly understand what this means to us as fans? And we as fans have the right and the responsibility to speak up when things aren't right. And I'm choosing to take this opportunity to speak up and say, people in leadership positions have to get it together. The right hires need to be made and action needs to be taken. We have to think out of the box. You have to be proactive. You have to get a lot of smart, innovative people in a room, and you got to figure this out, because what you're doing, what you've been doing, what this university has done for far too long is not working. I'm proud to be a Rutgers graduate. I'm proud of the academic institution that Rutgers is. We just want to have pride in all of it. And we have at times. And Steve Pikiell brought that back to the program. And I'm not trying to diminish what he did, but we're now 3 seasons in a row with very disappointing Februarys and March. And there's a lot of bad luck thrown in there. But at the end of the day, responsibility needs to be taken and change needs to be made. Thanks so much for listening and watching once again here at the Scarlet Faithful podcast.